Thank you for staying tuned. Well, for days now, a viral exchange between a public office holder and a military officer reignited conversations around respect, authority, and the boundaries of civil engagement. So this conversation has torn through all regions of the country like wildfire in a matter of days, and so much so rapidly became pertinent for it to be understood from the lenses of the Niger Delta experience. Now, watching all the scenarios play out forces the question: how do we, as a people and as institutions, handle civil disagreements without necessarily eroding mutual respect or escalating tension? Or these issues play out across the Niger Delta, considering the many installations the region plays host to by virtue of its many oil-bearing communities. Now, for this, we discuss today, centering on how best to manage civil disputes, whether between civilians and military personnel, within communities, or between citizens and government agents, so to say. Our guest, a legal practitioner and former presidential candidate, Mr. Asukwo Mendie Achibong.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure.
Welcome to Niger
Thank you,
Delta Today.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure.
All right, and we're looking at the civil and military dispute resolutions, and we've had some issues regarding that aspect. In fact, in Akwa Ibom, I think some months ago, there was an issue. It was power related. The PHED went to cut power, and then it resulted into an issue, and then the military were deployed. Some issues of that nature. And we've also had some cases like that, like the one which is currently viral, making rounds, everyone with their hot takes on the Minister of the FCT and the naval officer. We've had cases like this. When do we have to talk about a civic engagement? When can we bring in the military to resolve issues? Let's start from there.
You know, the military has one role and one function, and that is to defend the territorial integrity of the Federation of Nigeria against outside invaders and aggressors, right? Within the Federation of Nigeria, the role of the military is extremely limited, but for the fact that they are housed within the Federation of Nigeria in military camps, right? Within the territory of Nigeria, we have the Nigerian Police Force, who are supposed to enforce the laws of the Federation of Nigeria within the territory of Nigeria. The Nigerian Police Force cannot step outside of Nigeria to enforce the laws unless they are invited as peacekeepers. Then the military cannot step back into Nigeria and enforce the laws unless they are invited where there is bound to be, or there seems to be a likelihood or strong potential of civil disobedience that will overwhelm the Nigerian police force. That's when you can call them to come and back up the Nigerian police force. Unfortunately, for a certain number of years, we've seen the interplay of military being on the road with the Nigerian police sometimes, and also with vigilantes sometimes, and their role now seems to be dual in nature, policing and defending Nigeria against external aggressors. But generally, it shouldn't be policing. You should be defending the country against external aggressors. Within the territories of the Federation of Nigeria, it should be that the Nigerian police has supremacy. So wherever there is you have disputes, regardless of who is involved, the Nigerian police should have, supremacy there. Even the Nigerian police, where people can say, hey, the police cannot arrest a serving military officer. Well, they can detain a serving military officer and invite the military police to come and actually arrest him and take him back to the military cantonment for detention, right? So wherever you have civil discord, wherever you have civil disagreement, wherever you have a misunderstanding that borders on purely civil matters, the Nigerian military has no jurisdiction.
Well, I'd like to bring in the FCT minister's case here. And in that case, we've had hot takes, and so many of them seem to be on the side of the naval officer.
Well, everybody is an analyst when things like this happen, but you have to step back, and I can only view it from the angle and prism of a lawyer. Okay, I've practiced in Nigeria, I've practiced in the United States, I've practiced in the United Kingdom. So I view these things a little bit differently. First of all, wherever you have such an issue, you have to look at jurisdiction, power. Who has the power? Who has the authority? Who has jurisdiction in this matter? To establish the issue of jurisdiction and determine who has jurisdiction in this matter, you have to look at the people that are the parties involved. and the principal issue involved as well. So what is the principal issue here? Land, where? Federal Capital Territory. Who are the parties involved? The Minister of the Federal Capital Territory and who? Another individual who happens to be a former Chief of Naval Staff, Awal Sambo. Now, when you look at it, is this land owned by the military? No. Is there military materials on that land that would make it more of a military allotment? No. Is it owned by Sambo as a civilian? Would own any other parcel of land in Nigeria? Yes. Is this a civil matter? Yes. Who is in control of the lands in the Federal Capital Territory of Nigeria? The President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Has he delegated the authority in terms of land to any other person? Yes, he has. To who? To the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory of Nigeria. And who is that individual? Wike. Wike is now vested with authority for all the lands, federal lands, in the Federal Capital Territory of Nigeria. Therefore, this issue, is it military issue? No, it's not. Is it a civil matter? It's a civil matter. Should military officers have been deployed to resolve a civil matter? They should not have been deployed.
Well, looking at this issue and the way military operate now in the country, at what point did we start abusing the use of military and maybe creating that lapse between when it should be the police that are made to handle a situation and when it's the military? Have we really started abusing it? And if we were to use the Abuja incident to create some sort of example, is this something that has been occurring and could continue occurring if it is not nipped in the bud?
Well, when you have elections, who do they bring out? They bring out the military and they do a military parade of force, right? That shouldn't be. The elections are civil matters and it should be only handled by the Nigerian police force. So if we start from there, then we might be going a long way in resolving this matter. Now, what happens in other countries? When I analyze an issue, I like to see what happens elsewhere, right? So that I know, are we going in the right trajectory or are we off base here? What happens in the United States of America? Can they deploy active military in the streets? Only if there is about to be insurrection and disorder. Then the president can order the National Guard. Not actually the military force of the United States, but the National Guard of the state, right? But furthermore, what happens with military officers, including generals in the United States military, when they retire? Do they have command and control, and can they issue orders to serving military officers? No, they cannot. They don't have command and control anymore. They are not attached with any military officer at all. They just transition straight into civilian life. But it's very different in Nigeria. When a person at a certain rank, starting from Rear Admiral, okay, I'm focusing on the Navy now. Rear Admiral retires. He goes up with some military personnel, the driver, the cook, and the personal bodyguard or chief security officer for him. When the Chief of Naval Staff retires, he goes up with a retinue of serving military personnel with a chief security officer that is going to be at least at the rank of a lieutenant. And that is an entitlement to him for the rest of his life, right? Here, he can issue orders to these serving military officers outside the command and the chain of command of the serving Chief of Naval Staff, right? And maybe, in all likelihood, the serving Chief of Naval Staff would not be so eager to countermand those commands, which is exactly what happened here. You could see the young man put his hand in his pocket and speak to a Chief of Defense Staff. Sir, we are here on a legal mission. We were ordered to be here. Well, from lieutenant to a four-star general is very, very far, all right? Some might say, well, he stood up to Wike. Some might say he was right. Some might say he was wrong. But I will tell you something. If the next Chief of Naval Staff or Chief of Army Staff also deploys military to guard his private property that is involved in civil dispute, what do you think will happen? We will very quickly come to a point of a civil disobedience, because anything, remember a couple of years ago, anything that happens, we go and rent some military folks to come. We've stopped that. Okay, so you owe me money, I get the police involved to beat you up, take you to the cell and lock you up. Well, we've stopped that. At least we have we are on the way to stopping that, right? We've made some progress. But here, when you have a military officer that has been retired or at least is in is on terminal leave, able to command troops of the Nigerian Navy and then protect his personal property, it's going to be a problem, especially if that protection is against a minister of the Federal Capital Territory.
All right, are we seeing precedents here? Is this likely to reoccur if it's not nipped in the bud? Apparently, what we're seeing right now are praises for the military officer. But is there a point where this can get negative if it is not nipped in the bud? And then what does the Constitution even say concerning matters like this in Nigeria?
Very simple. The Constitution puts the authority of civil, let me just back up first. We must have civilian control of the military. There is no debate about that. That's in the Constitution. The civilian, the commander-in-chief of the Nigerian Armed Forces is a civilian, right? He has control, absolute control of the Nigerian military. Every civilian, okay, is not to be subjugated to the orders of the Nigerian military. They serve the commander-in-chief at his pleasure. So we cannot have the Nigerian military, as important as they are, even to the extent that they are willing to lay down their lives for the protection of the average civilian like yourself and myself against any external aggressors. But they must still be subject to civilian control. So it means that in civil matters, no matter who is involved, they must be subject to the laws of the Federation of Nigeria. But if it is a military matter, and that's quite expansive, and I'll give you an example. If it is a military matter, then they are subject to the Armed Forces law, right? Okay, example. So a military man comes out, beats you up, he's subject to the Armed Forces law and could also be subject to the actual laws of the Federation of Nigeria, the criminal law, the civil code or the penal code, depending on where they are. So you could actually go through the punishment or trial as a military officer or personnel, and then still come out and face trial under the Nigerian law going forward. But here is the thing. In this instance, it's a purely civil matter.
But if we're looking at issues on this multiplicity of issuing of orders, especially from retired officers, sometimes it's not just retired officers. We see even regular civilians who have had maybe one contact or the other with military officers into some minor issues, invite them as friends to carry out some activities or the other. How can we avoid this multiplicity of issuing orders to military officers in a country like ours?
This might be a perfect and fantastic opportunity for the president of the Federation, President Tinubu, to actually rein in some of the activities of serving or former military officers and establish the limits of their authority. Is it possible for a military officer that has been retired to issue orders to serving military officers? I think it is improper. The president, as the commander-in-chief, has to be the one to actually establish the fact that it is improper. And is the former chief of naval staff subject to court-martial on this issue? I think they should really look into it if it's to be subjected to court-martial for bringing in military officers into a purely civil matter. Why I say they should really look into the issue of the court-martial is it almost got to the point of exchange of gunshots, bullets. Well, the military officers were not going to budge. And what if the police officers with the civil defense men and the DSS officers who also had guns were not going to budge and were determined to get into that property? And they had the right to go into that property. Wike had the full right to go into the property. He is vested with all the authorities of the president within that property. People forget one thing, and that thing is very important. What is Wike? He's a minister. Yes, we know he's a minister, but guess what? He has equivalent powers of the governor of the state, even more, because he has the powers of the president in the Federal Capital Territory, and those are federal powers. So whatever the governors can do in a state, he can do it in the Federal Capital Territory.
It also takes us to cases of some communal clash, where, for instance, the Okwoma clashes, and we've also had some cases of that nature in different Niger Delta states. where the military are invited to help curtail such crises. And sometimes we see that the military, these problems escalate. Do we have such, or is it in the jurisdiction of the military coming to some communal issues of that nature?
Well, some of these communal issues can be very, 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 how would I put it, explosive, right? Most of the times they overwhelm the Nigerian police. And when they overwhelm the Nigerian police, it is appropriate and proper to invite the military to come in and pacify the population there. And they do a good job in pacifying the population. If a lot of times, if they're unable to pacify the population, guess what happens? They take the land and turn it into a military cantonment or a military base, right? So everybody goes away. You know, you're unhappy, but we are happy. We have the land now, and they form a base immediately, and they develop that base, and you dare not get near. But where it is simply an issue of A versus B, or A versus the established authorities, such as the Federal Capital Territory being led and ministered by the Honorable Minister Wike, then it is a purely civil matter, and you cannot deploy the military to go there. It's so dangerous. Remember, the military does not know anything about negotiation. They only know stop, don't move. If you move, I will shoot, and they will shoot. Whereas the police, you can even, Nigerian police, they are very diplomatic. Really, there are some bad elements, but when you watch them, they like to diffuse issues where you have things of this nature come up. You can even see someone walk up to a police officer, push him, he will step back and just look, okay? But if you go and push a military man, he's not trained to step back, he's trained to shoot. So when you deploy military personnel, it's a very dangerous situation that you're trying to encourage.
All right, Barrister. Well, when we look at the Nigerian situation, the experience, talking about security issues and how it has contributed to this full-blown release of military men to parade and carry out activities that they're not supposed to carry, how much of this can you hinge on the issue of insecurity in the country and how it has given the military more powers to operate across the country? You know,
insecurity has made us, has made the Nigerian military more visible within the territories of the Federation of Nigeria. It's brought them out into the streets of the Federation of Nigeria. Before, if you see military patrolling the streets, there is a coup, right? But now it's a normal occurrence because they are trying to pacify the terrorists, either up north or some kind of uprising in different parts of the country. So people are no longer alarmed when they see the military on the streets of the Federation of Nigeria. But generally, we should have them withdraw back into the military barracks, okay?
And we're even going to be able to achieve that until the security issues are handled effectively, some sort.
Well, that leads me to another point. I do see a lot of activities on the part of the presidency and also the military in terms of curtailing and improving the security status of the Federation of Nigeria. After, of course, Trump did issue some, statements concerning his concern, a particular concern for Nigeria and the Christian genocide taking place. Whether there is Christian genocide or not, it's a matter for a debate for another day. But here is one thing: I will promise you that President Tinubu is very grateful for this particular situation because it's deflected and taken away the heat regarding the Trump's tweets a couple of days ago. What are we all talking about now?
We're talking about Abuja. Well, it was a perfect distraction. Perfect distraction, yes, indeed.
It really was. But I hope, and I sincerely hope, that the Ministry of Defense, having said that they will look into the matter, the Chief of Defense Staff having said he will look into the matter, and also the Chief of Naval Staff having said he will look into the matter, that it will be established that no retired military officer can order any military personnel to interfere in a purely civil matter.
There's a group of military men that are actually opposed to any attempts to punish the military officer. They're saying nothing of such should be done, otherwise they are going to take some actions. Well, that's by the way out of work.
No, that's important because it reflects the thinking of retired military officers, right? Well, they are retired, so they should calm down.
Well, I was also going to quickly get maybe a take. We've not had the opportunity to also get to understand what you feel about those comments made by the U.S. president.
President Trump. Look, I completely welcomed it. It's fantastic. there were too many killings, and there are still too many killings in Nigeria. These killings are done by who? By one group, Islamic terrorists, right? Against Christians and against Muslims as well. Both sides are suffering. Now, we tend to forget African traditional religions who are also suffering as well with the destruction of the shrines. It puts all these conversations on the table and discussions on the table. Now, is it appropriate for America to invade Nigeria in order to protect Christians? It's inappropriate. But what is the appropriate thing that should be done now? I think the government should be more concerned and show more activities and more strength, more political will, military might to protect every Nigerian within the territory of Nigeria, and most significantly also outside the territory of Nigeria. As we were going before, it was not sustainable, it was not appropriate. The Middle Belt had become a civil war area.
Okay, let's, before we let you go, we would like to, is there a possibility of this particular rift between a civilian and a naval officer escalating or spiraling to people beginning to take steps or fighting back at military officers?
No, nobody should lay a finger on the military officer. I do object even to the use of improper language against that military officer. It was not proper. But that's the nature and character of the minister. Wicked. I don't know how much I can say honorable minister. But honorable minister Wicked, that's his nature. He's garrulous. He's combative. He's full of energy, right? But it showcases the fact that we must respect our military men because they promised and they have signed an agreement with the Federation of Nigeria to lay down their lives to protect us. Use of that language is not proper. Nobody should assault a military officer. It will be completely wrong.
Indeed, that also, some people are of the opinion that calling a military officer who is well kitted a fool, that's like tantamount to calling Nigeria a fool.
Well, you know something, I know it was offensive, but guess what? Just generally, I believe that was improper. But I believe maybe if the military officer had just composed himself a little bit more and remained quiet and executed what his orders had asked for, he might not have gotten to that point. You understand? That shaking of the head, I'm not a fool. No, you can't tell me to, whatever it is. I might have aggravated the situation, not excusing the use of those words. But if it was maybe a colonel a colonel level person in the military, I think it would have been more tactful and still have achieved his goal. Remember the police officer, the CSP that stopped the governor of Lagos State from entering into a property? As he was speaking to the governor, he was bowing down. Exaggerated movement, bowing down. So the governor received his respect, right? And then the governor gave him his respect as well. That is a young man, 25, 26. He's still hot-headed from India.
Well, thank you very much. Asukwo Mendie Achibong, Esquire, legal practitioner and former presidential candidate. Thank you for speaking to us on Niger Delta today. We appreciate your views on the program.
Thank you.
We really do appreciate your views.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.
All right, so that brings us to the end of Niger Delta today. Thank you very much for watching. Catch you again tomorrow for another fresh edition. My name is Xavier Robert. Have a terrific afternoon.
And I'm Jennifer Pius. To have a great day.